Hey, what's up? So, I want to talk about a certain topic. I usually don't talk about politics here, and I want to be delicate. I don't. Um, I probably maybe shouldn't be talking about this, but I'm gonna. And I want to talk about English newspapers abroad. So, for example, in Japan, there's the Japan Times. And if you travel to different countries, you're going to find that there's these newspapers in English. Of course, they're not the major newspapers in a country where English is not the native language. But you'll find them, and it's perfectly fine to work at one of these places, to be such a journalist. It's perfectly fine to be on the left, to be a left-wing journalist. I think that's perfectly fine. Okay, so I'm going to be criticizing these, and I'm not saying that they shouldn't exist. I'm not even... It's going to sound like I'm... like this is a contradiction, but I'm not saying that they... I guess I would be saying they should be doing something different. But what they should be doing different is just to be more creative. But that said, I think the best journalists in a country are probably not going to go to the minor English-speaking newspapers. So basically, it cannot be helped that this is the way it is. Things are the way they are, okay? And so I accept that. And so this is just commentary. I'm not really saying that I expect the world to be different from how it is, if that makes sense. I know that may sound like a contradiction. But my main problem with these newspapers, I can't really read them anymore. Took years to realize this, okay? That's why I'm sharing this information, because sometimes it takes years to figure something out, and I think that's information worth sharing. The problem is that they're extremely predictable. Now, I want to talk about a couple of articles I remember specifically from the Japan Times. So in Japan, there's, I think, 2 English-speaking newspapers. I subscribed for years to the Japan Times. I had it delivered to my home. And eventually I just couldn't handle it anymore. And to be frank, there's just this sort of very predictable, uncreative left-wing reporting. And again, it's fine. It's okay to be left-wing, okay? But I mean, I think it's good that we have left-wing and we have right-wing, and those ways of thinking are not always the best way to think about politics. So I think of it as sort of like classical physics. Classical physics is basically wrong, except for maybe a few select concepts, like conservation of momentum is something that has survived as a concept. Even conservation of energy in most cases is used. However, there are cases where you might, like cosmic inflation, for example, where it might not hold. But anyway, so there are concepts from classical physics that are still part of our modern understanding of physics. But for the most part, classical physics is essentially a sort of approximation that we know is wrong at some point, right? It's perhaps useful as an approximation, but when you analyze details, it breaks down at some point. So that's why we have quantum physics and we have relativity. Well, we have our notion of gravity. So with politics, it's similar. I mean, the left versus right thing is an approximation. I think it's a useful approximation, but it's going to be at some point when you analyze details, it sort of breaks down. The reality of people's political views is more complicated, I think. Now, I just happened to look at the Kathmandu Post the other day, which is from Nepal. And in Nepal, I think they speak Nepali. Is that right? And a lot of people speak Hindi. A lot of them are okay at English, but English is not the main language. And so, first of all, I just want to comment on like the overall. I'm not going to say that there's anything wrong with these, the content in these articles, but just how it's totally in line with what I expected. It's like there's absolutely no surprise when I come here, and so so my criticism is that when I see this stuff, what I see is like people that were given a homework assignment, right? And it's okay, but instead of creating something creative of value, they just said, I got this homework assignment. I gotta, say this stuff so that the teacher will be happy. And they just kind of like churn out a bunch of BS and turn it in so that they could get done with the assignment. That's what I see. Now, the crux of my argument, I want to talk about some articles that I remember from the Japan Times. But this just came up as a further example. And maybe the Kathmandu Post is perfectly fine. But here I see part of this pattern where I see, it's totally predictable. So victims' rights and criminal prosecution, maybe nothing wrong with talking about that. But everything is from the same point of view. Everything is that it's like there's a sort of a formula. Okay, so I guess let me talk about the articles from the Japan Times. So there was one about Kawasaki. Let me bring up Chrome here. So Kawasaki, hold on. It's an okay place to live, but in the article, so let's find it. Kawasaki. Here's what I think the article was. The article was, it's like a formula where if you looked at cities in America, you find the worst areas in a city, and you report on the struggles that people are going through, right? I mean, there's nothing wrong with reporting on that. And it's almost an easy formula. You look at different cities in the world, you find the people that are struggling, you report on their struggles, And actually, what they should have reported on, so, okay, here is Shinagawa, and over here is Kawasaki. Here it looks like a big area, but I think they're referring really to the central area. There's a bridge here with a train. This area is walking along this river is really nice. Tamagawa River. It goes quite far. So a great place to bike and walk. And actually, I'm thinking over here. Actually, so here's Kawasaki. What they call Kawasaki City. It's this huge area, but here's Kawasaki Station. And there's this bridge with this river. And what would have been interesting for them to report on is there's some homeless people living along this river. And, I mean, just in this area alone, I would estimate somewhere between 20 to 50-ish. Which 20. The thing is, they're rather well hidden. Right around here, there's actually a lot of. Is it right here? There's areas where the grass is quite high, like above head level, and so there's a lot of foliage, and in there's kind of hidden. It's not even tents, really. It's like they've built little abodes out of wooden boards and stuff like that. And one of them, I think I recall, had like a sign. It felt like, I mean, not, I'm sure many of them maybe have, you know, mental health issues and all that, but maybe a few of them, a small percentage, are just actually kind of content. Like they want to live alongside a river, and they just don't want to work and that kind of thing. So so there's a kind of community, and I think it's this area right here. Is there's sort of some artificial little area with fish where you can fish. So I think there's ordinary people fishing there, and sometimes maybe some homeless people fishing. And if you walk along this river, you can walk for hours, and occasionally you will see little hidden places where, I mean, I say homeless people, but they've kind of like built their own little home. But I'm sure they don't officially own the land. But I mean, that's interesting, you know, what's going on there. Now, people coming from overseas probably think that there's a big drug addiction problem. I would guess that the vast majority of homeless people in Japan are probably not. They probably do not have a drug problem. Drugs are not a huge thing in Japan. So I mean, there are illegal drugs, but and I've interacted with homeless people. I mean, drugs in Japan are really expensive, and homeless people, if they're on welfare, which I would imagine most of them are, because I don't see why you wouldn't collect welfare. Welfare, at least a few years ago, used to be about 100,000 yen a month, which at the time was almost $1,000 a month. So I kind of don't recommend fraternizing with the homeless that much, because some of them do have mental issues. But I was trying to help a guy who was trying to be a writer, and he didn't seem to have any mental problems. He was he had his faculties together, and but he should not have been trying to be a writer. He was trying to write in English, and his writing was riddled with grammatical mistakes, and it was very, very strange. Anyway, I helped him a bit, but he lived in a place that probably had like an assisted. I say homeless, but he actually had a place, you know. So, but it was probably like an assisted. I don't know, assisted living or something like that. That's the wrong word. Anyway, I'm guessing it probably cost him like 30,000 yen, or like $200 or something per month, to live there. And you know, it's not like a proper apartment. You see what I mean? And it was like a place for people who are struggling, I thought. Maybe I'm just being rude and this guy isn't homeless at all, but it struck me as homeless, you know what I mean? And so he could live off of that welfare. It's a little bit less than, it's probably 60% of what you would make if you were working in a convenience store or something like that. And now, is it the best way of life? No, but he could survive. And so that's interesting, this whole area. But that's not what the article was about. The article was, over the river, about this sort of the central city area. And there's some areas that some people might think are kind of dangerous at night. I used to wander around here. See, I used to live a couple stations over, 1 or 2 stations over from this. And so I'd wander around at night. I have issues with sleeping, and I walk a lot. So I never felt in danger personally, but I'm a 6'2", about 187 centimeters. guy, and yeah, I mean, I never felt in danger. So most American cities have far more dangerous areas than this. But the point of the article was, it's sort of like, to me, it was this fantasy that they were entertaining, which is that there are people, like, the idea was that there's this underclass of people living in the dense urban area of Kawasaki who, for some reason, cannot move. And the thing is, like, this is not the cheapest area to live. If, like, right in the center, where I was living was cheaper than right in the center of Kawasaki. Like, you could live, I don't know, out here or something. All these areas, you know, an extra 20 minutes away, and it's cheaper. And if you have a job and you're commuting, let's say, if you're commuting 30 minutes or an hour or something, it should be because you're getting pay so it makes sense. I mean, Japan has had a labor shortage for decades, so getting a job, an ordinary job like at the convenience store or fast food or like all kinds of manual labor jobs or just like basic office work jobs, is super easy because there's been a labor shortage for decades. So I don't understand, like, if you're supposedly this part of this underclass in Kawasaki that's really struggling, first of all, why wouldn't you move to a cheaper area? And like, it's not the cheapest area, so it's just, this whole thing didn't make sense. And Kamata, by the way, right over here, like, so this is like probably a 40-minute walk from Kawasaki to Kamata. So on the train, it's like 8 minutes or something, less probably, maybe like 4 or 5 minutes on the train to Kamata. And Bobby Fischer, one of the greatest chess players who ever lived, right? Extremely famous, world champion. Bobby Fischer used to live in Kamata. So that's right over here. So obviously it's not that bad of an area, right? Now Kamata is different from Kawasaki, okay. But I cannot fathom. Like, if you have a severe disability preventing you from moving, okay, I understand. Then make the article about that. And that doesn't really have anything to do with Kawasaki. But anyway, so there was this bizarre article, and at the time I lived very close to this area, and it's just this fantasy world of like, oh, there's this struggling underclass, which people are struggling everywhere, okay? There's always people struggling. But it was just a formula, you know? Oh, find the bad area of Tokyo. This was I'm imagining this was the assignment. Okay, find the bad area of Tokyo and write about the struggles of the people there. Now, this would be a little easier in Osaka. There used to be a bad area of Osaka. And I hear sometimes from Japanese people that there's this word I forget. There's like this sort of this lower class, but like this underclass, like, you know, like, if you talk about India, like there's the caste system. The way they talk about it is something sounds like that, where like there's families where if you're from this bad area of Osaka, it's like having a scarlet letter. It's like having this stain upon your reputation. The thing there too is, though, I mean, you can just move away. Like, it's much easier to live in the countryside than in the cities. I mean, you get less pay if you're in the countryside, but compared to the cost of rent and everything, living is easier outside of the main cities. So you move away, and then like the idea is like, oh, you have the bad reputation, okay, but you know, I mean, you move to a new place, you just tell people you're from Osaka. You don't need to like, and then yeah, I mean, maybe if you're getting married, you know, they want to meet your family, and like it's not a great situation. Maybe they actually don't want to marry you anymore. But that happens in all kinds of complicated ways that have nothing to do with that. Like, you know, they don't like their potential mother-in-law, or they meet your family and there's a problem. I mean, there's a million ways that could happen. And I never quite fully understood this story. It's like, if it's so bad, move. I mean, there's this idea that people can't move and they're like stuck in this really expensive area. And again, if we're talking about disability, that's worth talking about. Let's talk about the struggles of disability. I think the reason they actually talk about that less than you'd expect is that it's a pretty small portion of the population, and I imagine, hopefully with welfare and everything, they can be well supported. But that's something I'm interested in. People with severe disability, are they getting the support that they need? That's an interesting topic. I kind of suspect that when there's issues there's a lot of political support for helping those people, so hopefully they get met. But I think, there's always going to be struggles and issues and all that to talk about. Anyway, so that article about Kawasaki just seemed like a ridiculous, just this homework assignment, just a total formula. Just find the people who are struggling in Tokyo. Tokyo is like one of the best cities in the world. Okay, one of the most successful places on planet Earth in terms of human civilization. But, let's find the people who are struggling there and write an article about them. So it was just total formula, and it was total garbage. Okay, this place, 10 minutes on the train away from where Bobby Fischer used to live. Like, oh, excuse me, like, and you could just easily, so easily move away. And the area is just not that bad. Like, the thing is, like, if you say I live in Kawasaki, to me it's no big deal. But some people who, some people who live in the fancy schmancy areas like Shimo Kitazawa and stuff like that, they live in Kawasaki. That's not the best area, Ooh. Or like another place I've lived was what was it? Adachiku. Like, not the best area. But in terms of, like, it's Tokyo, it's Japan. Like, it's fine. Adachiku is up here. Anyway, so it just struck me as total complete garbage. I was just like baffled by this article. There was another article about that also seemed like a total formula. It was about a Vietnamese girl, probably, I don't know, somewhere young, like 18 to early 20s or something, who came to Japan, was working something to do with farming. So it was a farming that, it was a farm that makes, hold on, shiso. There's this, maybe you've seen it, this sort of Japanese herb or something, shiso. So it was a farm there, and so her job was to take these leaves and put them in the plastic bag, So it kind of sucks. But I think she's working 8 hours a day. It wasn't, I read the article, it wasn't, if it had said like she's working 14 hours a day, that'd be one thing. But, hold on. Reasonable amount of time. But she was very unhappy. Understandable, okay? So, if that were me, well, you can go back to Vietnam, like there's, like you don't have to live in Japan. But she was unhappy, and it's tough work. So the whole time I'm just reading the article and I'm thinking, okay, so the guy who employed her wanted to fire her because she's not very productive. She's not doing good work. So he wants to fire her. And if he fires her, she's going to have visa trouble. If you get fired, you can look for another job to sponsor your visa. You don't have to like immediately leave. But so this is where I'm saying it was a formula. So I'm reading the article, I'm thinking, well, how bad is her work? Like, is she, if she does good work, we're talking about putting leaves into a bag or whatever. If she's doing good work, obviously the guy wouldn't want to fire her. And is he obligated to keep employing a worker who he's not happy with? I find that weird, right? Like, you employ someone, you're not happy with what they're doing, and then you're forced to continue employing them. To me, that's bizarre and very anti-business and very bad for the economy. But that is what was happening. So he wanted to fire her, and she went to some organization to like legally lock onto this job and to keep her job. But anyway, so the whole time I'm reading the article, I'm like, well, if somebody comes to the country, they get their visa, but then at work they're just like, nah, they're a really bad worker. Like, you see they're kind of exploiting the system. So I'm thinking, is that the case here? I mean, I'm reading the article, and you've done nothing to convince me that that's not the case. And so it was kind of, I remember it as a long article, but you get to the very end of the article, and then he mentions that she kept getting in trouble for using her phone during work, and he or she, the person who wrote the article, writes how much she was producing, and it's like she was making like 4 bags per hour or something, whereas other people were making like 9 bags per hour or something. And it's like, think about that, 4 bags. It takes you 15 minutes to put a bunch of leaves in a bag. And I don't remember the exact numbers, but I remember reading it and being like, well, of course, okay, duh. Like, she's doing terrible at work. And so I like, it's just this very one-dimensional thinking where, okay, let's identify who the victim is. Let's identify who the weak person is and support them no matter what. And, it's always that one, that side, right? It's like, it's just a formula. Just find find the underdog, right? And root for them always. There's been some talk about this recently, but I don't want to get too much into it. But this idea that, identify the underdog and root for them no matter what, right? Is just a really dumb formula, but it's a formula that you see sometimes. And so those 2 articles, and then those 2 articles with the Japan Times, and then you start to just see this, like, because you see this pattern, you start seeing like what looks to you just like a formula. And to be fair to the Kathmandu Post, I haven't really read these articles, so maybe they're great articles. Maybe this is fantastic journalism. But I just see the same pattern that you're probably going to see with all of these English-speaking journals, because if you're conservative in whatever country where English is not the main language, you tend to focus, conservatives prefer tradition more than liberals, quote unquote liberals, like left-wing people. So yeah, I say that because there's a long history of the word, and it, in the United States it's not really used the way it should be used, but whatever. So what was I saying? So yeah, so conservatives are probably not going to end up being journalists at the English-speaking newspaper. Okay, so that's why it's probably always going to lean left, and you're not going to get the highest quality journalism. Okay, so it's just, to me, extremely predictable. And now that I'm looking at it, I just noticed this without fear or favor. Without fear is fine, but then a critique I have of a lot of left-wing journalism is just that they will often pretend like they're unbiased. And it's good that there's a left-wing. It's good that there's left-wing journalists. left-wing newspapers. That's going to exist, and that's good. But you don't need to pretend like you're unbiased. Okay? No one is unbiased. Everyone is biased. So without favor, I'm very skeptical, right? There's probably a slant. I mean, it's predictable. And again, nothing against nothing. I have no substantial criticism of the Kathmandu post. This is an example where it seems like probably this is the same kind of pattern as what I was talking about. My more substantial criticism is of the Japan Times specifically, but I remember then I lived in Taiwan for a while and I had the same kind of experience. Like I started reading the English newspapers, and after a while I just couldn't, because it was so formulaic. It's just always who's the underdog and let's root for them. So yeah, let's see the top area, enhancing urban public spaces. Again, nothing wrong with that, but very predictable. So police arrest. I mean, maybe very important journalism happening, but it's always going to be. I'm not going to say that. It's not always going to be predictable, but my experience so far is I have a very low opinion of these English-speaking newspapers. And so that's what I've learned over time. Now, I met a girl who's a journalist at the Japan Times, and very intelligent, good person. So I'm not saying I'm sure there's a lot of great individuals, and there's probably bound to be really good journalists here and there. I'm just talking about an overall thing that I have observed. That's all. Just commentary here. I'm not saying they shouldn't exist or anything. The newspapers shouldn't exist or anything like that. And I'm not even. I'm just observing, really. It's just the way things are. That's fine. It's okay. But it's good to observe. And yeah, that's about it. Observe and see what's happening. Be aware of what you're looking at. Sometimes it's just a bit formulaic, that's all. Maybe let's go to the Japan Times and see what's up there. What's up at the Japan Times? The Japan Times. Let's see what we get there. Maybe it's a miss. Global investors miss the specter of neo-fascism, right? Again, maybe a great article, but maybe it's part of a very formulaic pattern. I don't know. Anyway, nothing too bad here today. Nothing too bad. But I've consumed a lot of their content in the past, and overall it's been very one-dimensional. I'll put it that way. I want nuance. I want creativity. I want intelligence. What's going on with the homeless people here along the river? That I'm curious about. I don't need BS formula nonsense about how tough it is living in Kawasaki when you could easily move away. That's it. Ijo desu. That's it. Oh, this is really zoomed in, huh? I just realized that this is super zoomed in. Sorry about that. Actually, what was on the screen usually wasn't that important. Anyway, this has been a ramble. But, I'm not... You might say, oh, I shouldn't talk about politics. And for the most part, I'm not going to. And this wasn't... You could say, well, I haven't criticized anything right-wing. Believe me, I can sit here and criticize right-wing stuff if I want to find things to criticize. I promise you I can sit here and do that. What I really wanted to talk about is a pattern I see amidst the English-speaking newspapers in much of the world where English is not the main language. And that's it. I'm just sharing some commentary. That's it. So maybe I'll look more at the Japan Times. Some of this stuff seems interesting. Another thing that kind of I find on the news here in Japan, and you know, it is what it is. Maybe I would do the exact same thing if I were in their position. But I've noticed that when they talk about the Olympics, it seems like the Paralympics gets the same amount of time as the Olympics. And, you know, again, maybe I would do exactly the same thing. But if we're being honest, like, there's way more interest in the ordinary Olympics. So I just always, yeah, and I don't want to be that way. I don't want to be like rolling my eyes when I see like them talking for like 20 minutes about the Paralympics first and then 20 minutes about the regular Olympics. And I would rather that, I don't know, maybe I'm just a dumb jerk. If that's what you think, leave a comment. But you know, the NHK is like the BBC here. And I remember during the big C virus, one day they spent like 40 minutes going over and over again the question of whether or not the Olympics should be postponed, right? Because the Olympics was going to happen here in Tokyo. And I'm not in Tokyo at the moment, here in Japan. And I remember like, oh my God, after 5 minutes, I was like, okay, enough. Like, they keep repeating the same stuff. They had like a panel of people, like a group of people, and just going in circles after like 5 minutes. I just was in disbelief because it just kept on going and going and going for like 40 minutes, just like, and I realized gradually this is deliberate. I realized they know they're going to postpone the Olympics, and what they're doing is to prepare people mentally for the shock that the Olympics is going to be postponed. And so I realized, you know what? I bet you they're going to postpone it very soon, tomorrow or the next day. Because this is just crazy, like how they had very little to say. Like they had like 2 minutes worth of stuff to say that they were just repeating and repeating and repeating for 40 minutes or whatever it was. So I'm like, well, I don't really care about the Olympics personally. So I was like, well, I just realized this is not a bunch of journalism where they're trying to figure out what kind of information I should receive exactly. This is sort of basically a part of the government. You know, it's not explicitly part of the government, but it gets all its money from the government, and those sort of elite people are all hanging out in the same places. Let's be honest. They're all friends. And so they received orders from above. Hey, we are going to postpone the Olympics, and we need you to prepare people mentally for it. I think that's what happened. And that's not really surprising, okay? That the NHK is that way. But it actually disgusts me because they pretend that they're not what they are. They pretend to be unbiased. And there's actually, I mean, in Japan, there is a law that journalism is to be unbiased. Now that, to me, that's absurd because, again, everyone is biased. And so pretending that you're unbiased is absurd, is ridiculous. Now, so I guess in Japan, there's this weird situation because it's having a biased... I don't know the details of the law. I've just heard about this from other people who are in the business. But roughly speaking, I guess it's illegal to have a biased newspaper in some sense, so, which is weird because that could actually be used to really, at some point, that could really be abused to shut down journalism. So, and it's ridiculous. Journalism is going to be biased. Everyone has a bias. So if you pretend that you don't have a bias, that's the worst thing. The first step, it's like the first step to wisdom is realizing how much you don't know, that kind of thing. Know thyself, right? So this fantasy of being unbiased is just ridiculous. The independent voice in Asia, right? That's what it says here. Independent, okay, whatever. You're independent. Yeah, I don't like it. So at least the conservative news, and again, like I could criticize them all day, but at least they're kind of upfront about it, right? Like people, the conservative news in America, like they will say, you know, the newscasters, they'll say, well, I'm Christian, you know, and I just prefer the honesty. I do not like, you know, people who are like my mother in their 70s or whatever. They kind of get duped because the left-wing news is just, I don't know. You have to be kind of daft to not see the bias. So it's like it's the elephant in the room. Everybody knows it's obviously biased, but there's just kind of this like snide, smug, like we're the unbiased, like CNN, you know, like everybody hates them now. It used to be like the ordinary news that you'd see in the doctor's office, but it became so smug. Like this guy, everyone hates this guy, Brian Stelter. I think he had to leave or whatever, but like. What a douche. This guy's so smug. So full of himself. Look at these pictures. Maybe I shouldn't be so specific, you know, but there's a video of Don Lemon being asked if CNN is biased. He goes like, what? No, we're not biased. And, you know, he's kind of got like a little bit of a grin, like there's a kind of a subtext like, well, duh, we're biased, you know, but it's my job to say that we're not, right? But that's already like really gross. Like it's your job to say that you're not biased. I mean, come on, just be upfront about it, you know? Just be upfront about it. Just own up to it. Anyway, what do you think? That's all I got to say right now. Have a good one. Bye.